Hello and welcome to another episode of Change One Thing, the show where we explore if tomorrow will really be what tomorrow will be. Hi there, I'm your host Larni and joining me for this episode is Sean Redmond. Sean is a professor of screen and design in the School of Communication and Creative Arts at Deakin University. Sean is an international leader in his research fields of celebrity and stardom, genre studies and science fiction cinema. His career output spans books, journals, exhibitions and establishing an international conference for celebrity studies. He has been described as a warm, generous and honest academic poet. I loved my conversation with Sean and could have kept talking for hours. We cover a range of topics from celebrity, social media, reality TV, science fiction, loneliness, and of course, Bowie. Lots of Bowie. So let's get into it. Here it is, Change One Thing with Professor Sean Redmond. Enjoy. So Sean, your bio is by far one of the most interesting bios I've ever read. Let's jump straight in here. Can you tell us how you got into this very interesting field?
Well, since I can remember, I've been interested or enamoured with stars. I can remember watching TV on a little black and white box in my auntie's house in Coventry, where I come from. And there was Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, a series of sort of early school comedians on. I was just enraptured straight away, not just with comedy, but with the type of characters and performers they were. And then really from then on, all I can remember is being interested in these sort of starry figures, whether it's Elvis Presley or David Bowie, whether it's the great Marlon Brando, whether it's the genius Mickey Rourke, whether it's Lauren Bacall. I've just been sort of enwrapped with the way they are as performers, as individuals, as these bejeweled figures of fame and fortune. So I guess the early influences were all about pleasure, the pleasure that stars gave me. We didn't really talk about celebrities then, of course. It was stars, whether they were rock stars or film stars, even TV stars. And so I think I took that sort of joy that I had through watching these films with these stars in it. And it just followed me through life, really. So I can remember my mum was a nurse and she used to get really bad slip discs. And what I did, I suppose you shouldn't do with somebody with a slip disc, but she'd be bedridden for days. But I can remember trying to entertain her because she was so poorly. Stuck in bed with a cup of tea, and I'd come home from school and I would perform some of these characters. So I can remember jumping on her bed with a guitar I had with broken strings and singing Love Me Tender, pretending to be Elvis Presley. And I can remember her sort of smiling, but I'm sure underneath she was grimacing as I sort of rocked on her bed with a slip disc. So it's always been there for me, always been a sort of core and enwrapped pleasure of mine to think about and consume these stars. I guess the critical sense developed later when I wanted to question what it was about them, what it gave them, what I was doing them and what I needed from them. And I think ultimately that did lead to the journey in academia where I write about stars and now celebrities. So that's it.
Yes, well, we do have a little sound booth here. We might be able to get a bit of a Elvis Presley demo later. Sean, maybe.
You would lose your audience in the podcast. I'm tone deaf. My voice is terrible. I still sing to my kids, and when I do this, I do them lullabies, even though they're getting older now. And they ask me to do these lullabies where I pretend to be Bono or Bowie or Presley. I do a bit of Frank, but they do it only to laugh at me because my voice is so tragic. It doesn't get them to sleep, of course. It just gets them rocking the house just with comedy.
Them stirred up, yeah.
It's too funny. I did it once, and I remember the house was topsy-turvy, so they were downstairs or upstairs, and I was the opposite. And I remember leaving them thinking they were all sound asleep, and then moments later, just roars of laughter as they recalled how absolutely terrible my voice was.
Well, Speaking of your voice, and I'm sure our listeners have noticed you do have quite the accent there, a little bit Antiques Roadshow going on, reminded me there. So what was it like growing up in England? And as a little boy, obviously you just explained that, you were fascinated by celebrity from a young age. What was your childhood like growing up in England, and how did you make your way over to Oz here?
To Australia.
Yeah, Australia.
I love the way you collapse the words. I love it here. Rello, servo. It's outstanding.
We're lazy.
I should say, because I'm proud of this fact, even though I don't like being essentialist at all, but my mother and father, my mum and dad were both Irish, and they emigrated to England from Ireland in the early 1950s. So I had one of those sort of Irish English upbringings. You had to go to church on Sundays, did confession and confirmation, went to a Catholic school for a while, but not for long. And we were relatively poor. I know it's a sob story that you often get from academics, but I do come, again, proudly from a working class background. My dad was a scaffolder, so it wasn't a very wealthy upbringing or anything like that. Maybe that's one reason why stars offered me something else. A sort of a type of escapism from the sort of hard reality of our life. I'm not sure that's exactly true, but I think it's one of the facets. So I grew up in Coventry, in this Irish sort of community with a loving, brilliant mum and dad. I've got two gorgeous sisters who are older than me, but brilliant feminists and thinkers. So I was always in a regardless of that background, in a really sort of supportive family. I was a bit of a hoon as a kid. I've got to be honest. I'm not making this up either. Perhaps that's even an understatement. So, it could have gone terribly wrong for me, I think, if I hadn't decided to take the right road, and it was the right road. I was suspended from school at one point, and I was heading for a really, really heavy car crash, and lots of factors I think persuaded me even at that age. I was around 13 or 14. It really was crisis time. My mum was beside herself. They didn't know what to do with me. So I should say another early formative thing for me was poetry, which obviously won't come through in my biography necessarily. But somehow I got introduced to poetry. My dad always used to actually speak poems, an oral storyteller. But I had an amazing Irish school teacher at the school I went to who sort of introduced me to Yeats and Auden and Heaney and a range of other poets. And I think somehow I started writing in all this abyss, in all this chaos, all this craziness that I was doing. I started writing. Somehow I put a pen in my hand and I started writing creatively. And that moment, along with a few other things, changed me and transformed me. And then I ended up working hard at school, making my parents proud. Went to college, then to university. And then I started thinking and writing. Now, how I got here, I think I am restless. And I think it's a positive strength that I'm always hungry for something new. I can't stand still. It can be annoying too, because I'm constantly on the move, and I know that people find that I'm restless as well. And I just wanted to see the world, to get out here. I went to New Zealand first, from England, and toured in Wellington. I had a brilliant few years there. And then I had the opportunity to come to Deakin, which I took up. I think Melbourne's a brilliant city. The university's outstanding. RVC, Jane, is one of the best VCs in the world. She's absolutely incredible. And I don't just say that, for favour. It's absolutely true. So I've worked at a really supportive university. I love Australia. I'm a citizen now. I got that a few years back. I love the way the culture moves and shifts and shapes and runs. And I'm really proud to be here writing and thinking and working in this environment. So it's a bit of a long story, but I suppose it's the classic rags to riches. I come from a low working class background with two loving parents, was ragtag at school, found a way through poetry, went to university, studied film, started writing about stars, and then ultimately I ended up here.
Amazing. I love that. And, sometimes you've got all this creative energy and you've got to have an outlet for it, which was obviously your poetry. And even like going back to when you were 14 or 15, that sort of off the track or off the rails part of your life, sometimes you've got to go off track to get a bit of that worldly experience. And you're such a well-rounded person now, probably for that.
I think so. It grounds me. I always feel privileged. I do. I know I'm very lucky to be able to do what I do in the way that I do it. And not everyone has that opportunity. Not everyone has got through that I did. I've still got friends working in factories in Coventry, who get 2 weeks a year holiday. Now, they're not necessarily unhappy, and I love them dearly, but I know they were better than that, and I know they wanted more, so I am very lucky. But it does ground me. It makes me, passionate about equity and equality, and it makes me want to do my best for my students who might come from those backgrounds too.
Well, you've got that understanding, and as you said, like, we are very lucky in this country with education, and we do have some of the best researchers in the world here.
I mean, it's amazing. It is, and I think we're even, it's a bit of tall poppies. I think we're even better than we are. I mean, Melbourne's a sort of hotbed, though, particularly in some medical science, world leaders in so many respects. And we've got some of the best screen study scholars. We do. I'm not counting myself necessarily amongst them, but we do in this city, from La Trobe to RMIT, from Deakin to Monash in Melbourne, and Swinburne. Brilliant screen scholars and practitioners. That's another reason why I love it here. So it's in the arteries and veins of the city, screen culture. It is everywhere you look, from Acme to Capitol Theatre, from the beautiful Art Deco Theatre in Yarraville, right through.
Oh, I love the Sun Theatre.
Isn't it gorgeous?
For any of our listeners that are around Yarraville, I love the Sun Theatre. If you haven't been, definitely check it out. It's just beautiful.
It is. It's like a step back in time, isn't it? When you sit in those seats and
the popcorn's cheap.
Yes.
You
can't beat cheap popcorn, can you? Really?
Yeah, I'm there. No.
What's your favourite popcorn? Have you got if you could choose?
I just love the buttery.
Do you like the buttery?
You know what I like doing, actually? I like putting the Maltesers in the hot popcorn. Yeah, try it.
Wow, I like that.
And having that sweet and savoury together. Oh, it's delicious. It's so good. So I buy a box of Maltesers, bag of popcorn, in go the Maltesers, and then I'm set for the movie.
That's brilliant. Because I think, it divides film scholars. Some film scholars go nuts about people eating in the cinema. That's what it's for. You should be sit back, get your popcorn out, and or whatever it is. And if you're in gold class, then your lavish meal, and then it's both sensorial for you as you eat and consume, and then the screen comes alive. So, I love popcorn, salted caramel for me.
Oh, unbelievable! Salted caramel, definitely. Now, when you're standing around with all the other professors, having little professor chats, if that's something that happens, all these professors standing around in a circle having
in our tweed jackets. Good day, Roger. Good to see you.
And you're all talking about what you specialise in, and you sort of pipe up and say David Bowie. Do you get any sort of weird looks, or is it? I assume it's a good talking point, at least at dinner parties and things like that.
Yeah, it's such a great question. How honest can I be? Sometimes you do get the look, like, are you shitting me?
Yeah.
Really? You are a professor of David Bowie, which I'm not, but you know what I mean? It's that, you do get that look, and it still surprises me for some reason. But so I absolutely do get that look. It's like you're writing on. Films less so, because it is considered by many, regardless of discipline or background, to be an art form. If they know that you're interested and involved in writing about film, you don't generally get strange looks, and so many of us are film aficionados or followers of film, so that's it. But the stardom celebrity, definitely, you get the Roger won't talk to me anymore because you what you write about?
Bloody Roger,
the Badula. Oh my God. So I do get that, and yes. I stare them back intently, and I hold my own. But I was at this. It was an interview type situation. I won't give much more detail, and I was getting a series of questions from those in the room, and I won't give the context. But someone did lean forward halfway through this scenario. It was an interview, and say, "Celebrity? Really? You write about celebrity?" I couldn't believe it. But it actually made me a bit feisty. It made me lean forward and tell them why it mattered, why celebrity matters. And it matters because it's on our screens and our device. It's in our newspapers. It's on our social media. It's writ large across our everyday lives. It matters because it matters to people. And if we don't try to understand it, get critically engaged with it, trying to make sense of why people are so engaged with these forms, then we're doing a disservice to culture, to reality, to knowledge. If people know more about Beyonce or Taylor Swift than they do about Bill Shorten or Morrison, then we're in trouble, or at least, there's an issue there for us. So I don't find it hard justifying or explaining why we need to invest in, critically so, address so, celebrity culture, celebrity studies, celebrity society, whatever we call it, because undoubtedly it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere, and our job is to find out what's happening with it. If kids have low self-image or self-esteem, if they imagine themselves that they need to look like particular ideal body type because of star celebrities, we need to understand that, for example. And so I don't ultimately find it hard, but yeah. Roger has to be convinced. So
Roger.
If you're listening, Roger.
That's all right. We will, by the end of this, we will convince him.
Yeah. I just hope there isn't a Professor Roger at Deakin. Wouldn't that be terrible? I don't know.
I'm sure there could
no.
be. We'll have to find that out.
That would be too tragic for me, I think.
Now, you've co-written a book on David Bowie, and I want to know what sparked this initial love for David Bowie in particular.
Oh God, it does. I don't want to repeat myself. I don't think I will exactly. But so if I go back to that low working class house in Coventry where I grew up, when things were pretty tough, and not romancing it, we found, and I'll explain how we found it in a minute, listening to Bowie in my bedroom after a pretty rough day at school, gave me, a sense of another world that was possible. It took me outside those four walls, that particular sort of bounded life I was in. He often sings about impossible things, often it's full of science fiction metaphors, as you know, but it's not just that. He cross-dressed, he was transgendered, he was bisexual. He just transformed and offered new forms of identity that I guessed I embraced, needed to embrace, just to shake me free from where I was. So for me, he was just an important, really central figure in my upbringing, my identity formation. And so listening to him, seeing his visage on Diamond Dogs or Ziggy Stardust, painted, animal-like, ballsy, was just everything. So for me, that's where that came from. And I've had a lifelong love and interest in Bowie and David since then. I should say my sister's also a big fan, so it's that classic thing when you get handed down stuff. So I was introduced to Bowie.
It's like an AFL team here,
I guess.
Yes. If your dad or your mum goes for a particular AFL team, you just somehow as a child, that's your AFL team then.
That's it, isn't it? That's right. So I got handed it down, and then he just swept me up. It was the right time. I think they knew what they were doing, my sisters. They knew it would matter to me. So that's where that came from. And then as soon as I started writing about stardom and celebrity, Bowie was on the horizon, on the radar. This book is actually called the Fandom of David Bowie, not its full title, but what we did was we did focus groups and ran a questionnaire right around the world to find out what everyday people, other people did with Bowie, why they were fans of him. We had 300 people complete the questionnaire from everywhere, from Tokyo to Glasgow, from Minnesota to New Delhi, right across the world. We had Bowie fans responding to the questionnaire. Then we did focus groups in Berlin, in Tokyo, in London, in New York. What a life, come on. Amsterdam for a different reason, but we went to Amsterdam. He's not really connected with Amsterdam, the other cities he was and is. We ran focus groups there. And then we did some individual interviews. And so the summation of the book is just all these fan accounts of why people were interested and engaged with David Bowie. And it was incredibly affirmative, which is opposite of what we've been talking about, the worry about celebrity culture we're hinting at in our speech so far. We found that people used David Bowie, were interested and engaged with him, were lifelong fans because of the way he offered them ways out of their own subjective positions, particularly people who were realising they were gay, and then they were able to use Bowie as a conduit to expressing that and sometimes coming out. So we found all these remarkable things. It's been one of the highlights of my career so far. Again, a privilege and a pleasure.
Well, we will link to this book in the show notes as well. And I have to say my personal favourite Bowie memory as a child, was watching him as the Goblin King in the Labyrinth come out in that blonde mullet and all that black eyeliner, and he played the villain quite well. I remember being quite scared of him as a kid, but absolutely loved it. In your opinion, better actor or singer, or is that like splitting apples and oranges?
The man's a god. The thing about Labyrinth,
and that's enough said. Yeah.
the thing about Labyrinth though is the package, which you may have, I didn't or not, but and lots of fans wrote about that. That was their sexual awakening. So I don't know. I don't mean to. I have no idea if it was for you, even subconsciously, but that came up lots of times and we've written about that in the book, his appearance in The Goblin, which seemed like a relatively minor role or a film that didn't do very well, but for fans, particularly at the age they watched it became this massive moment, which I wasn't expecting. So, but you'll have to read the book when it comes out later this year. It's all submitted, so it is in, and it'll be out later. But yeah, that was quite fascinating. It's difficult, really. I mean, early on, he because he played the crowd, because he played the journalist, he'd often say, "I'm an actor and not a singer." So and then he turns, "I'm a singer, not an actor." So he deliberately plays with this notion of what he is. Of course, he played roles. We're talking about David Jones, who is David Bowie. David Bowie, who is the Thin White Duke, is Halloween Jack, is Major Tom. And so he's always playing a part, even when he's performing as a rock star. And that's fascinating for us as well, these layers of persona or star image. I think he's a pretty good actor. I do. And he has performed in some of my favourite films. Merry Christmas, Lawrence is a wonderful film. And he's outstanding in it. And I do like him in Twin Peaks as well. And I've written a bit about that. So I don't know. As a rock star, as a demigod of the stage, 10 out of 10. As an actor, maybe 4 out of 5.
Wonderful. Now, back to your study that you've done in celebrity studies. You've actually developed an annual celebrity studies conference in 2012. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I with a good and close friend of mine, Sue Holmes, we actually set up the journal Celebrity Studies almost 10 years ago now, and we realised that was what was still missing would be a conference where all the scholars who write about stardom and celebrity could go and gather. So soon after we launched the journal and it became quite successful, people were writing for it and it was getting picked up, which is everything. I'm really proud of that. We thought a conference every 2 years would be brilliant. So we did the first one here in Melbourne, outstanding success. People from all over the world came. And then once we knew it was a success and that it had value and that we were doing interesting things at the conference, important things, we've run it every 2 years. So we went from there to London, to Amsterdam. We did Rome last year. My life is so good, isn't it? How can I sit here without a smile on my face?
Just another excuse to go to Amsterdam,
Yeah, Amsterdam was brilliant. We did a celebrity cruise as part of the conference. So we always try to mix. So, I mentioned pleasure, I think, already. And we try to make the conferences pleasurable too. So it is deep and complex and important discussion around things I mentioned earlier. But we also have fun. So we did a brilliant celebrity cruise in Amsterdam. We went and passed all the famous houses. So there you go. The next one will be, actually, we're going to Winchester next year. So back to London, England. And I can't wait.
Wonderful. So our culture, as we were saying before, is obsessed with celebrity. Why do you think we're so obsessed with celebrities? Why do we admire them so much? Is it because we want, as you said earlier, what they have?
God, I think there's lots of answers. So I might take you through just a couple, and then if I get really boring, just stop me. So what is it about celebrities that offer us? So there's a writer, Chris Roger, who says that since the collapse in the belief of God, in the Western world in particular, there's been this huge gap, a gap in faith and belief. Now, Roger may not be right, of course, because there's a rise of religion in certain contexts too, so it's even more complex than that. But say he's right. Say that there's no longer this big story that many people believe in. Celebrities seem to be able to fill that gap. They become a conduit for sort of faith-based I better be careful. But what I mean by faith-based is with the same sort of ritual practices as that the church used to offer people, that pilgrimages used to offer to people, that worshipped figures offered people. So I think Chris is right about that in a sense, that we're looking for some sort of stabilizing social glue type thing that connects us with something meaningful. So that is true. They are seductive figures. These are figures of beauty, of iconicity, of grandeur and wealth, and we can't help but arguably radiate towards them. And so there is a level of seduction, of playfulness, of glamour, of glory, of spectacle that offers us something we just don't have in our ordinary lives. So it is a degree of escapism. We're escaping from and into something. There's always that. It's a double thing. There's lots of other reasons, but I don't want to just end, because I mentioned the Bowie book. Of course, the other reason is because they allow us to form communities, fan groups, social media sites. They allow us to go to rock concerts and let go. They allow us to gossip with our friends, like we were doing before we went on air, talking about Alex Nation. Did you watch, oh my God, can you believe what she did? And it becomes the discourse of just the everyday. And it can be tittle tattle. It might feel lightweight, but it also can connect people. It can bring people together. It begins to be an icebreaker. It becomes a conversation starter. It might get us talking about gender and sexuality. We didn't, but we might have said, well, Alex Nation's interesting because she moves across gender binaries. So she's quite a positive figure. We might have started arguing or debating. You might have said, no, she's not. So it's the rub of the everyday that allows people to form interesting conversations. Gossip can be productive. It isn't always destructive, for example. So the three big answers would be the collapse in the belief in God and celebrity, the way we worship them and identify with them, mirror in some respects religious worship, not completely, and I know it's more complex than that. The second is their level of seduction, of the way they offer these really quite whole, powerful and empowering identity positions. And the third is because they might give us communities or belonging, gift economies that may not be existing otherwise. And I think the rub against those, because they're sometimes in contention or contradiction, is really interesting. And I think it depends on who you are, if that makes sense.
So interesting.
Wow.
That is an amazing sum up, Sean, of why, because we don't, I guess, and what you're saying about religion and, we are worshipping these celebrities and then what you're saying about forming connections, because it's human nature to want to be a part of a community and to form connection with other humans. So it's just that whole background is so interesting. I'm going to spin it a little bit as we're rolling into the reality TV side of celebrity. With the rise of that over the last 15 years, have we sort of lost the true term celebrity? Have we seen the last true celebrities such as David Bowie or Elvis or Marilyn, who became famous for, God-given talent, as opposed to, say, the Kardashians, no offense Kardashians, who are famous because of reality TV and social media?
Oh, what a great question. So you're right, there is this thing called achieved celebrity, that what used to happen was you had a talent, and then through your talent, whether it's acting, songwriting, performance, racing car driving, driving race cars.
We know what you mean.
You'd end up getting famous for that. And increasingly what seems to happen is you're famous just for being famous with no talent or skill necessarily. So the Kardashians are the bugbear there. Everyone talks about how really there's nothing there apart from fame itself and the consumption of fame, which you were drawing attention to earlier. It's all about products and services and brands. Even their own selves are fully branded corporate commercial entities. And reality TV seems to be the epitome or the exemplar of a vulgar, low denomination form of celebrity culture, and there's lots of arguments to suggest that's the case. And I do occasionally sometimes lean a little towards it. because there's other discourses around the trivialisation of public affairs that we're more concerned. I think we talked again about this, about these particular formations than we might be about what's going on in the world, or climate science, or things like that. So you can see why it's a whirlpool of issues. Having said that, again, though, because I don't want to just play devil's advocate, if we are, there's some really brilliant research by a scholar called Joke Hermes from Holland, where she interviewed women about their consumption of reality TV. It's a brilliant book. So it's again with real people. I can't remember how many people she did. I think it was based in Holland, where she comes from. Because I think she was trying to find out, is it really bad for us? Because it's distraction. It's empty. It's not to do with talent anymore. And what she largely found with these women was that they were doing amazing things with them. That gossip really did allow women to talk about the breakdown in their marriages, issues around their family life, divorce, economic inequality. So but what she found was when they talked about whether it was The Bachelor or whatever it was, and Big Brother it would have been then, they weren't just, it wasn't paraface or parody, it wasn't empty. There was something tangible that they were using it to discuss important issues. So I guess what I'm trying to do again is to take us through the opposite arguments. And I think they both have validity. I am worried a bit. I have to be honest, a bit about that form of celebrity. But I understand that there's more going on at the same time. Sorry, does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And speaking of, you mentioned Big Brother there, and that show in particular, 15 or so years ago, that really revolutionised the term celebrity for us as well, because it meant for your everyday average Joe that they could then become a celebrity overnight for the first time ever.
That's right, yeah. So Graham Turner, I don't mean to mention all these names, but because I owe them a debt and it's how we do it. I feel like a scholar. But Graham Turner calls it the demotic turn. And what he means is that it looks like there's greater access to the mass media, particularly through celebrity. So it looks like anybody can make it. And reality TV shows was an indication of that, because we could get on TV just being ourselves, supposedly. Ordinary people got a chance to shine. Although we had talent shows since, way before then. But particularly through this new genre, which went all over the television schedules, it seemed to open up access and make it available. And with the rise of the social media, if we then jump ahead to now, with celebrity influencers, micro-celebrities, Insta-famous, we seem to have a whole new wave or generation of celebrities using the social media to form star images or personas. And again, it seems even more so that one can make it. What Graham argues, again, it's a bit complex, and I won't get highfalutin, but I think he's a bit right. Sometimes it's access without power. So you can have access, but you're not really changing anything. You don't really have any control. And when we think about people on some of these celebrity shows, like we were talking about The Bachelor again off air, when we see the postscripts and the transcripts in their interviews when the show ends, they often talk about not having no power over the cut, how it was edited. That wasn't really me who said that. What the worry is there, though, sorry, just to link it again as we move backwards and forwards, which is what I do for a living with this stuff, is when kids are now, there's a brilliant research in the UK, this is quite scary, and I've forgotten the name of the authors who did it, but they asked, I think it was a couple of thousand of school-aged primary kids, what they wanted to be when they grow up. And I think this was longitudinal, meaning they asked them over a couple of years. Initially, of course, kids used to write, I want to be a pharmacist, a physician, a firefighter, doctor, teacher. And what they increasingly found as the study went on, that kids wanted to be famous. And so this desire to be famous, to be a YouTube influencer, to play Fortnite and be a celebrity, is a worrying. It has to be. I can't forgive it. I can't just resort to gossip as a productive output, or I can't pretend there aren't an issue there. Not everyone can be famous. That's because we don't. Because fame means something special. Everybody becomes famous, it loses its meaning. So you've got all these tensions already. So there are worries for us. Why is it the kids? Why do kids now desperately want to be famous? What is it offering them? Back to your question earlier, that drives them.
Free stuff.
Yes, it is, and I think you were saying it to me really as well. It's a consumption cycle. I'm selling myself. I'm going to be able to buy things with what I sell myself with, and it goes round and round. And there are issues there for us. There just is.
And I guess if they're, wanting, and as you said, not everyone can be a celebrity. If all these kids are comparing themselves to celebrities and, they're growing up, I guess, and having quite a normal life, there's that happiness barrier there as well, that you're never sort of always wanting something that is sort of out of reach as well.
Yeah, no, that's good. So that's it. That's the other end of the rope, really. Dissatisfaction, and alienation, a sense of not really being important if one isn't famous. And we know that's increasingly happening through data, that people feel increasingly disconnected or not worthy. I'll give you a quick story. My daughter, Erin, actually lives in New Zealand. Her phone broke. When did it start? What day is it? Thursday. It's a Tuesday, and I got an email from her school account saying, "Hi, Dad, my phone's broke. My life is over." She literally wrote
the
this.
anxiety of having no phone.
That's it. Well, you get it straight away, and I did as well. So I understood, but I was, and it carried on. I didn't know how to get to my class because my timetable's on my phone, my schoolwork. She did this brilliant because she wants a new phone, of course. That was the object of it, but also the terror of being disconnected was something palpable. It really did knock me sick in a sense, because she's a very stable and that's not the right word. I mean, Erin, I just mean that she's not someone who sort of would pander to drama at all. But it's that phone is obviously partly connected to celebrity culture too. It's where we watch our YouTube videos and where we do our selfies and where we present ourselves, often increasingly, especially young teenagers, as if we are a celebrity. We mimic and parody the pose, the shape, the style of the celebrities we admire. You know how it works. I've seen my daughter do it too. And that's gendered, of course. So what I'm racing through or knitting together is all these sort of worries or issues or threads and themes that I'm alive to, that we have to be alive to. I should say it shouldn't be just my job. If you listen at home, parents, it's all of our job really to get to grips with this. I do think it's important. In the old days, we used to talk about media literacy, that we need to teach kids how to read images and signs and sounds. Now it's more important to teach kids media criticality, how they can critically address, engage with, understand what it is they're presented with. And we've lost a bit of that, and that is my job, to try to ensure, at least at university level, that the kids come my way, that pleasure is good, it's everything, that we enjoy what we do, but we develop what I call a deep and philosophical and important critical sense. And I want my daughter to be able to do that. I don't want her to freak out when her phone goes down. The world hasn't ended.
Absolutely. And they're influencing our every move, really, like what we're wearing, what we're wanting to do, what cars we're driving. Do you think there's a little bit more, speaking of your daughter, a little bit more of an impact on young females rather than males? I don't know if I'm being biased in terms of the body imaging, wanting to be look like the celebrities.
I think there is. I have to be careful too. I'm like you. I'm hesitant because I don't know what empirical research. There hasn't been enough done, but I would say there is a correlation between body image, the size of one's waist, all those ingredients, those measurements, and celebrity culture. Absolutely. We do know that, for example, when a star like Jennifer Lopez was in, the people people having butt implants and stuff like that. So it was a phenomena in the US in particular. We know when waif figures are in, that also produces a different type. So we know there is a correlation between the catwalk, between fashion, between the star or figure in light. We do know, and that's an issue. That really is an issue for us. So I think it possibly is. It is gendered. But I don't think young men are excluded from it. So the other angle would be something like toxic masculinity, of course, which I don't mean to bring all of this deep, dark stuff here, but men are also learning, young boys are learning, particular forms of aggressive masculinity through certain stars and celebrities. And that's a worry. So I think some of it is gendered and in different ways. Yeah.
I think we've definitely convinced Roger that, celebrity studies is by far one of the most important topics. And
well, I'm expecting a phone call from you later, Roger, and I want an apology for the way you looked at me.
This episode is presented by Deakin University. You can find all of the show notes and other great content related to this chat at disruptor.deakin.edu.au or find us on socials at Deakin Research. But this brings me to our next topic, Sean, of science fiction, which you are also very passionate about, and I absolutely love this. And you wrote a piece called The Loneliness of Science Fiction, which I absolutely love, and we will link to this as well so everyone can have a little read of it. And I'm just going to read a couple of quotes from the start of it that just sort of leads us into this article, and then I'm going to get you to sort of explain. I absolutely loved this article, by the way.
Thank you.
So you say when you're introducing the genre of science fiction, you start by saying that if you want to know the fears and concerns that are pulsating away at the red heart of contemporary life, look at the art forms where the future is being explosively reimagined. And you also say to your students that if you want to know what the political concerns of our times are, just look not to the Dow documentary nor the social realism, but to the liquid, silvery profundity of science fiction. I'm not even sure if I read that correctly.
That was beautiful. That's great.
But
wow,
I love it, and I love the whole concept and the thought about this piece. Can you explain what you meant behind the piece for us?
Yeah, so I get on my, that's like the opening line in the first lecture in the first week, and they're all sitting there. And what I'm trying to do there is show them that just beneath the skin of a fictional text, a science fiction fictional text, we're going to find so much more. In fact, because it is often set in the future, it allows itself to be more radical than one might imagine, because it's through smoke and mirrors that we can see what's really going on. I'm a big fan of the documentary, and to my colleagues in film studies at Deakin who make documentaries, I love you deeply. I think your work's outstanding. It's not dour-ish. And to those who work and teach and believe in social realism, the great works of Ken Loach, for example, you are fantastic. But if you really want to know what's going on in the world today, what it is that irks us, what concerns us most, you really will find it in science fiction. Because in dreaming the future, it borrows from today. It has to. It future predicts. It speculates on things that are going on today. And very often it does so with real aplomb and vision and dexterity. So that's how I start. And it wraps them in. It enwraps them. They get it straight away. And then I'll show them something and they'll go, oh, of course, that's about that. And that's what we're worried about today, whether it's AI or cloning, whether it's environmental degradation, whether it's, manufactured gene crops. What science fiction does is take what's going on today and show us what might happen in the future if we don't sort our shit out. And it's brilliant when it does that. It has that. It
it really gets us thinking, doesn't it?
It does. Now, what I'm suggesting, I don't think it's the only thing that contemporary science fiction is doing, or the only thing that we're worried about. But I started thinking about this a few years ago. I think it was Watching Under the Skin, which I write a bit about, but also The Martian. There's quite a few film texts, which is my main area, that I thought were implicitly, if not explicitly, about loneliness, about being isolated and disconnected. And I was trying to think why, if I'm right, there's more of it about. I mean, it's always done it, as I say in the piece. Science fiction's always had this air of loneliness depending on its form. Astronauts get lost in space. Survivalists are on their own. But I just had this sense there was more of it going on. And then at the same time, I started reading all this really sort of powerful stuff on what Georges Monbiot calls the crisis of loneliness in contemporary society. And the figures are quite startling, the figures about how so many of us feel lonely and disconnected, and it's cross-age range that the data suggests. We've done a big study here, massive study in the UK. Yeah, we know about it in Japan historically, for example. And I wanted to do that. I realised that that's what I was doing. I was mining science fiction for what was a social issue, this issue of loneliness. And so that's where it comes from. It comes from beginning to see, I think, or sense that contemporary science fiction now has this veneer of loneliness about it. And it reflects, but not just reflects, interprets what's going on in our society. The seas are rising, the ice caps are melting, the rise of nationalism is scary, but alongside all that is the tyranny of loneliness. And I think it's really, I think it's important to address.
And you do mention as well, as you said before, the sound image of the lone astronaut hurtling through space, far away from planet Blue, and contact with home is lost, is one of the defining lonesome moments of the genre. We've seen it over and over. Is this because we all of a sudden we question our insignificance when we're looking back at the little blue planet in this giant universe and we go, oh, we are very small?
I think that was beautiful. Yeah, no, I think that's it, like a speck of insignificance. That we really are made of atoms ultimately, and that, you know, for all our grandeur, that's what we are. I don't say it in that piece, and I did want to, like, I try to balance that discussion of celebrity. Loneliness is part of the human condition, though, melancholy and sadness. The Japanese have got a term called mononowari, which suggests the delightful, the blissful sense of loss. And we do experience loss in different ways at different times. And I don't think we should be scared of feeling blue or sad or melancholic. You know, it marks us all. This is about the excesses of loneliness, about disconnected people in rural communities who don't really have access to things. It's about the breakdown in communities increasingly. It's about my daughter being more worried about her phone than about her family. Not really, but, you know, that's the polemical I'm trying to share. So... But, yeah, no, that's beautifully expressed, the sort of existential sense that we're nothing. And I love that shot when you look back. Isn't it incredible? You go, wow. NASA's always doing it.
Yeah.
You know, and then you can see the Milky Way sometimes and the infinite nature of space. Wow, yeah.
So, Sean, in terms of sci-fi depicting all these possible outcomes for the Earth's future, some of them are a little bit grim. What's one thing, if you could change one thing today to impact that outlook or, you know, ensure the future of the Earth, what would that be?
Yeah, well, I sort of indicated that I think that loneliness is this vessel, this conduit within science fiction to express something really important. And quite difficult, tragic in the real world that's happening, that people do feel disconnected and isolated. It's systemic, it's overarching, it's political, loneliness. Because I'm not here talking about, as I said, the sort of the positive notions of self-reflection and sadness that we all go through and helps us journey as human beings. I'm talking about this excessive loneliness which fragments us and isolates us. So if I could change one thing, I'd build 1 million youth clubs. I'd make sure there was 100 more community centres. I'd make sure they were populated by an army of community workers, all who are well paid. And I'd ensure as best that we could that we connect people again, reconnect people so that they don't feel isolated. Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the great Prime Minister of New Zealand, I would add, has suggested she wants a new type of global politics. A global politics based on compassion and kindness. It's the opposite of Trump. It's the opposite of rising populism. And I think if we could take those two engines, compassion and kindness, and invest in these structures that I mentioned, then we can begin to tackle this epidemic of loneliness.
Because we do see, in particular with the science fiction outcomes in movies, when we do have that disconnection where it's sort of like every man for themselves and everyone's, fighting for food and supplies, and that sense of community really has gone out the window.
Yeah, no, it's often, especially in those apocalyptic texts, it's survival of the fittest. It's man and boy against everyone else. And so those survivalist texts, I think, are metaphors for analogous to, that's not very well expressed, to these issues in the real world. I think one can make a demand, a desire, a suggestion for active social change while looking at these fictional texts, and the correlation, sometimes the collision between them, is what fascinates me. Human beings, we're great. I mean, I'm an optimist. I absolutely, wholeheartedly believe that together we can do something. We really can. And so, but it does require quite a deal of structural change, I would suggest. That so my one big change thing is sounds incremental, but it's something that's achievable, I think.
Keep that sense of community and community centres, and keep everyone feeling, I think we need that to stay alive, that it's in our human nature. We want that sense of community. So that's excellent. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on.
What's the best piece of advice you've been given on your path to success?
Oh, God, take risks. Don't be beige. I've always been scared of being beige, which is my metaphor for polystyrene khaki pants, and it was always take risks, be brave with your writing and your thinking.
Is time really our most precious, unrenewable resource?
Yes, I've got a favourite quote: "A time is flying, never to return."
Yes, that's great. If you could recommend one book to the younger generation to get them on the right path to ensure that future of our earth, what would it be? Just one book.
Oh, wow. Station 11. Just forgotten the author's name. Science fictional. Cli-fi. It's a travelling Shakespeare band who live in this post-apocalyptic world. It's brilliant.
Amazing. We'll see if we can find that one and link to it as well. And if your life was a movie, Sean, what would it be called and who would star in it?
Oh, yes. Wow, what would it be called? I would want Colin Farrell to play me.
Oh, nice.
I'm
ruggedly handsome.
Well, he is, and he's Irish, and no fear, no danger. God, that's terrible. Sounds like an SAS
no
film.
Fear, No Danger.
Starring Colin Farrell as Sean Redmond. What would be the tagline? It'd be tragic. That would be a terrible film. No one would see it. It'd
I'm thinking Fast and the Furious type. Trailer, like some sort of hoon, just drifting around a car park type situation as well.
Kind of all these flashbacks, a shot of me in my mum's bed with my guitar. Breaking out of school.
Brilliant.
Dressed as Bowie,
Yeah.
That is such a terrible title. If whoever listens to this, they're going to lose respect for me. I'm so sorry. I was under pressure.
That's right. We got you with that one.
No fear, no danger.
No fear, no danger. Coming soon.
R18.
And Sean, is there anything we haven't touched on that you'd like our listeners to know at all today? Have we sort of covered most things that you want to get across?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a delight and a pleasure. And I hope that if anybody is out there feeling isolated or dislocated, fragmented or, on the margins, then connect. That's what we always say when we worry about people. So if there is anybody, of course, there is hope and make sure you're safe, something like that.
Beautiful. It's been an absolute pleasure, Sean. Thank you so much for joining us on Change One Thing.
I want to do this every week. Is there, why am I only coming once? What's
we
this
can
about?
do that. Let's get Sean back next week.
You'd be bored with me next week. It'd be the same jokes, the same dad jokes. I'd be...
We'll think of another movie title, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm going to spend all week thinking about it. Damn.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to review, subscribe, and share with your friends.